Welcome to today's episode of the Medical Device Marketing Podcast. So this is the next episode in our special series where we're asking specialist consultants to come in and talk to us about their specialities so that we can become better medical device marketers every day. So today we've got Amanda Hayhurst from Gloucester Road Communications. Welcome, Amanda.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Gloucester Road Communications is a specialist PR agency dedicated to medical device. They work with companies to help build their credibility with media coverage. So recently, Amanda gained 1.2 billion views for a recent client, over 67 pieces of coverage. Amanda, that is pretty amazing. Can I ask you to introduce yourself to our audience and understand a little bit more about who you are and what you do?
Thank you so much, Claudia. It's a real pleasure to be here. Thank you. So I am an ex-journalist. I spent 15 years as a health journalist. I worked with Piers Morgan on the Mirror back in the day, in the 90s, the days of Britpop, etc. Happy days. I worked for Grazia. I was the founding health and beauty director of Grazia. And I worked for various different newspapers, including the Mail, the Standard, etc., etc. So I have Fleet Street experience, women's magazine experience. And around about 2002, I was feeling a little bit frustrated in my job, actually. I was forever sort of tagging along with the sales team for the Mirror and various magazines I worked for. And they were saying, "Are you sure you want to come out with us?" I said, "Yeah, I'm really interested in business. I really, love commerce and business. It just floats my boat, I had no idea really what I wanted to do, but I essentially fell into PR I advised a PR agency on how to invite journalists and run a really successful press event. And it started from there. And I thought, I can do this. So I started my own little PR agency. I ended up selling that in around about 2009. And that was a MedTech agency. And that experience, massive. It was so interesting and informative for me to meet these Americans in Boston and San Francisco and also our Stockholm home office. And I just learned a huge amount from them. And I just thought, this is really what I want to do. I'm really interested in medical devices. I think this is the future.
We've worked together for a while now, so we've seen the coverage that you've got for many companies. I know we're going to talk about that through this as well, because it's always been really impressive to me, but it's also because you're so dedicated to medical device. It's all you do. Yes. So how did you get into medical device? Because we sort of heard before about, you're a journalist before, had an awful lot of experience there. Yeah. Why medical device?
Well, I've always been really interested in the science behind, health. And even though that's not my background academically, so even when I was writing Caprice's Secrets column for the Daily Mirror, people used to comment on, the scientific content of that. And I always used to really go into depth of why a particular skin cream really worked. So I got very into peptides and etc. And so it sort of started from there. But I could just see that the future was perhaps not pharmaceutical so much as a device led. And I think my feeling is that devices, you can be a little bit more creative in that space as a PR because of the regulations, obviously. And also, I just feel that devices in that area, no one had really staked their claim to that PR area until I met my American colleagues. And they immediately recognized in my agency, they recognized a fellow enthusiast for med device. And then obviously I could see in this much bigger agency with sort of 500 colleagues that what they were doing in the US, we could replicate in the UK. So we had a London office and we did really well. In fact, we ended up being acquired in 2012 as one big agency. So I found myself, having worked in my sort of little garden office with 4 other people as Hayhurst Media, I suddenly found myself in Kensington in one of the biggest PR agencies in the world. And from there, I thought, no, this is not what I want to do. I want to run my own business. That's what I really love. what floats my boat, as I say. So I left that agency in 2012, and I've been running Gloucester Road since.
I think when you say about medical device, I think everybody who's in medical device and dedicated just to medical device is so passionate about it. So, you know, it's amazing, because we've spoken to other companies during this series and they're all dedicated to medical device, and the passion comes through from everybody. There's something just about medical device that we all really, really enjoy.
Just one other thing about medical devices. I don't know of any other area in which you can interview a patient who's had a device implanted, and quite often they feel better as soon as they've come round from the anaesthetic. And that's just, as an ex-journalist, and I still feel like I am a journalist at heart, you know, as a story, that's incredible, really, when you think about it. You know, maybe they've had that condition for 20 or 30 years, and then suddenly they're better. And that is incredible. It's transformative. And that's what I love. That's what really gets me up in the morning and wanting to find those stories.
It's amazing. So let's take it back a little bit for everybody who's listening. So just to make sure that we're all on the same sort of level, what actually is PR? If we go right back to the basics, what is the definition of what is PR so that everybody understands it?
Okay, well, PR stands for public relations, which doesn't really help.
Yeah.
Sorry.
But it's a start.
It's a start, yes. Essentially, I like to define it as it's earned media. So whatever the type of PR, and I think there are so many subcategories now that are quite trendy, like digital PR and traditional PR. Essentially, all PR agencies, all they do is try to get their clients to achieve earned coverage. So coverage can even mean a podcast, a mention on a podcast. As long as money hasn't changed hands, that is PR. So it doesn't matter what the media is. It could be digital media. So it could be, you know, something, as I say, even like a podcast. It could be an influencer on Instagram. As long as you've not paid that person, that is PR. And that's how I would define it.
So it's really the skill of persuading people, or having something that's credible enough for somebody else to engage with and say, I want to report on this. I want to talk about it.
That's spot on. Yeah, exactly. So it's, you know, it's having the skills of persuasion. That's really important in PR. I'm persuading. Yeah. You will run my story.
So one thing that's a lot more trendy now is social media. How does social media, because I think, you know, there's all these different channels we can go out on when it comes to marketing, PR, and social media will probably sit more within marketing than it does within PR. What's your thoughts around that?
I think social media is a good way of amplifying the coverage that you've gained. You should absolutely be involved in social media, using your key messages that you've also used for your PR campaign. I see PR and social media as part of an integrated strategy. And for me, obviously, I would say this, you know, PR for me is the most powerful tool that you have as a marketer, and you should not rule it out. And I'm here to persuade you and that everybody that it's still, always has been, and is still as important a tool. It's so important. I think it's essential.
I think we've had this conversation before, we've spoken now, and, you know, we've had experience before of PR, and the coverage you can get and the speed at which you can get it is amazing. So I think, you know, it really is something that people should be thinking very seriously about, just because of the impact that it can have in a really, really short time.
That's right. Yeah. So if you can, if I think of some recent examples of how quickly a coverage can be gained. So as a rule of thumb, I would say 2 to 3 months to get some coverage. Obviously, there is a bedding in period where you have a very steep learning curve as a PR agent. You have to get to know your client. You have to get to know the physician advocates, understand the key messages. And also, you know, I always start off first and foremost, what are your business objectives? What do you want to achieve by doing this PR? And it could be that PR is not for that company at that particular time, or, you know, they're not set up or geared up yet to actually benefit. So it's not always the case that PR is right for every company, every med device company at every moment. And it, obviously I can, if anyone wants to contact me, I can tell you quite quickly whether it is or it isn't.
But I think when I was talking before about how fast it can get awareness, I think there's obviously that embedding in period. But if I sent out, and people may disagree with me on the podcast, but from my experience, what I see is if I sent out a social media post or a paid advertisement or something like that, and it went out at the same time as an article in the Sunday Times, the article in Sunday Times is going to spike my website way faster than any of the other activities, unless I put a significant amount of money into paid ads. Even then, I suspect it wouldn't spike it at the same rate as the media coverage would.
So let's drill down into that. Why is that the case? Why does the Sunday Times piece?
Good question.
Yeah. So the answer to that is that it's not the company saying it. It's the Sunday Times. I think that PR is all about building trust, and that's so important with medical devices. It's about having credibility and trust. So all the messaging and all the information that you're putting out there via this journalist or via the Sunday Times, first of all, there's a test. Is it in the public interest? Is it true? Has it been accurately stated? And if you can tick all those three things, you absolutely need to be doing PR.
And so that gives the audience who's then listening just has so much more trust in that source, which is why it more likely spikes the website.
That's right.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
So people who are listening to the podcast now might be thinking, I really want to start thinking about PR because it can rapidly increase my awareness. What are the options that they have in PR? What different types of PR are there? Like, what do they need to think about before they get started?
I don't think you need to worry about the types of PR or get into the weeds of the detail. I mean, that's really what I do. So what I need to know from the client, whether they have a marketing department or not, and I work with some pretty small companies, sometimes it's just me and one person, actually, one other person. So I would say, what is the objective? Why do you want to go out there with a story? And then I'll work out what types of media and when and what the messaging should be, working with the client. So it's very much hand in hand all the way through. In fact, the more time I spend with a client, the better the campaign, the more effective the campaign. Because at the end of the day, it's not about just getting coverage. It's about getting targeted coverage that achieves an objective set by the client. And as far as I'm concerned, you can get billions of coverage views, but if it's not the right messaging, you've wasted your time.
But we would say that 100% over in marketing as well, because we can get you huge amounts of impressions and things like that. But if it's to nobody who's interested in your medical device, why do it? It's a vanity metric, isn't it, instead of a sanity metric?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
You say it doesn't matter the different types of media, but if I'm a medical device company now, what I'm thinking of do I need patient testimonials? Do I need, what sort of things like that? Do I need clinical data? Like, how much do I need before I even start talking to you?
So I would say, as a bare minimum, you need clinical data. And you also need 1 or 2 physician advocates who are really excited about your product. I think that's key. In terms of patient testimonials, if you've got physician advocates and they're actually using your product, well, how else would they be enthusiastic and excited unless they were using it? They will have patients who eventually you will find a patient that they can consent to speak to the media. And that's the way round that it is. The physician has to consent the patient, whether it's private, NHS, it doesn't matter. So we start off with the enthusiastic doctor, at least one.
Yeah.
And
clinical data.
Clinical data. And you also need, as a minimum, to have the equivalent of the safety mark. So whether it's UKCA, CE marking, you need to have that. Yeah. Then we can have a conversation.
Okay, so it can be really quite early stage. Yes. What if you don't have CE mark yet? So if you don't have any regulatory approval yet, is there any ways of starting to talk about a technology? So when it's in development stage, or they have to have the CE mark EU MDR before they come and talk to you?
I mean, you can do investor media, obviously, to talk about your route to getting that safety check and mark. But I would say probably if you're going to patients, then and you're communicating in consumer media, that is actually seen by potential patients. I would say keep your powder dry, talk to investors through the media if you wish, and then let's plan a campaign once you've got that sort of basic regulatory approval showing that you're safe.
Yeah, but it's good probably to even start talking to you earlier so that they have a plan in place and everything's ready for when they are ready to go.
Yes, by all means, yeah. Very happy. Always happy to talk to small to medium enterprises. I'm a small company and they're a small company, and I think small companies work well together. They understand each other, and I think, they can be more flexible. And I think that works as a partnership. So I absolutely very keen to talk to any small companies who have a great story.
Now, I've got a bit of a controversial question now, but I'm just going to put it out there.
Okay.
See what you say.
I'm nervous.
Why can't I, as a medical device company, why can't I just go to, the big media outlets myself and just pitch my story? Like, why can't I just go do that? Why do I need to work with a PR agency?
Okay. You can. Of course you can. And if you have contacts, perhaps you should, But I think, people know what their strengths and weaknesses are. And, once you have that initial story in from the person that you met at the golf club or whatever, it's really what happens after that. I think what I do is I reinvent the story multiple times. In fact, Claudia, I would say most of my clients have come to me when they've already had a piece of coverage in the Daily Mail or another similar publication, and they say, oh, our PR agency sort of dried up after that. We don't know what to do next. I would say 95% of my clients come to me saying that. And they say, can you do any more? And they're not very hopeful, to be honest. They look a bit defeated. Well, I think one client said that to me, and I worked for them for another 6 years, and produce coverage. That's what you go to an agency for, a good agency anyway.
I suppose the interesting thing is you have a very strong journalistic background, which actually enables you to understand how to see the story, which means you can then build on a story time and time again. Because I'm sitting here thinking now, if I had one piece of coverage, I wouldn't necessarily know how to evolve that. And that's part of the skill, being able to do that. And I suppose also having the relationships within the industry to know who to speak to about what and how to communicate with them is also really important.
It is. I mean, it's obviously helps if you know people, but it's not the only skill that a journalistic background will give to you. We talked about patients and patient testimonials. I would say that was probably the key tool in the PR arsenal. I mean, not all clients have that yet, but they, it's all about getting to the point where you're ready to talk to a patient. So are you going to entrust that interview to maybe your secretary or your somebody who's doing English literature at university, or are you going to entrust it to somebody who's had 35 years of experience of interviewing and who actually grew up on Fleet Street interviewing people and getting them to be emotional about what happened to them, and
honest and trustworthy actually as well, and unbiased and all these good things?
Yeah, I think, yes, absolutely. Yes, it's about being getting them to be honest, open, and just having one of those faces, those trustworthy faces. That's what my mum says about me. She says, you're the person that people ask the time from. You have a homely face, my dear. And I think it's, that is one of the things that helps, is that if people can actually trust you and say, yeah, come round, I'll make you a cup of coffee, you sit in their home. And it's an immense privilege, actually, for somebody to actually tell you their story. And quite often, because it's healthcare, there's sometimes quite a lot of trauma and tears involved. So, yeah, that's a huge privilege. And I love it.
And for them to feel comfortable as well doing that.
And to feel comfortable, and that you're actually, over the years, I've developed a protocol about making sure the patient always feels in control and that they actually enjoy the process of going out there with the story, because this is very precious. This is a huge amount of trust that they're investing in you and in the next person who handles their story. That's going to be a journalist. I, as an ex-journalist, know that if I've given the Sunday Times a professionally written ready to print interview, they won't need to ring Mrs. Jones again. And that's going to be better for her. There's going to be nothing in the public domain that she's not already approved. And I think that's important.
And I suspect that'll speed up the process as well.
It speeds
getting media to be published.
Yeah, they're all under pressure, even more so today.
Yeah.
So if you've done the job for them in a way that they understand,
it's going to make your life easier.
They're much more likely to run the story as well.
So here's another question then. So we spoke about everything's harder today, everything's tougher today. So in today's digital world, where is journalism going? Because it seems like it might be a slightly dying art. Like, why should people still believe in it? Why should people still invest in it?
Right. Well, that's a really good question. And I could do a whole podcast actually debunking the myth that journalism is dying. So we all know from headlines earlier this year, there was an Ofcom report stating that, it's terrible. Young people only get their news from Twitter, or they only get, X. no one says X, do they? They only get their news from X or Instagram, or they don't use the traditional media. Now, there was an Ofcom report, and it was earlier this year, and it's true. Young people do get their news from social media. It's much more complex picture than that. So let me completely debunk those headlines, which were oversimplified and misleading, I think. So younger people they look at social media, but where is that news coming from? It's coming from the traditional media. And in fact, almost 100% of the UK population watches broadcasted news. They may watch it on iPlayer. They may watch it on their phone. It doesn't matter how you watch the traditional media or consume the traditional media. I mean, I've got a digital subscription to several newspapers, so I'm reading the news on my phone. That doesn't mean that I'm not using traditional media. It's just presented to me in a slightly different way.
So it is just going across digital channels now instead of just being in the traditional print media.
So the guy who actually runs my old journalism school, which is the Cardiff School of Journalism based at Cardiff University, I studied there and got a master's in journalism. He actually commented on the Ofcom report, and he said, the box in the corner is remarkably resilient. Please, from these headlines, do not think that British journalism is dead. This is part of our culture. The Brits, we invented daily newspapers, and it's still embedded in our culture. That doesn't mean it's not under threat. It is. But we have this thing today called double screening. So you may well be watching the news on your TV and looking at Twitter at the same time.
Too often I'm watching TV and I have my screen on at the same time.
I do as well.
There's obviously the editorial and the advertorial side. I think one thing that really resonated with me when we spoke was actually that the editorial side has the higher trust level. So we did sort of touch on this before, but I know this is a question that's come up before about, why can't I just do advertorial? So I just want to talk about that a small bit. I know we have touched on it before, but, I think it's a really important point because the credibility that comes with editorial is so much larger. And maybe that's a reason why it is actually traveling so seamlessly across digital platforms now.
Yeah, that's right. I think it's worth doing advertorials, but, it's got to be part of an integrated strategy. And, myself running my agency, I have written advertorials for clients, and I've got involved in different, what I would call marketing communications. And I think that's definitely part of the mix. If a client comes to me and says, I want to communicate with doctors, I need this particular specialty in this area, how do I do it? We haven't had any procedures there yet. How do we do that? Obviously, you're going to pay for it. You're going to get your messaging out there with a paid for, but then follow up with earned. So as soon as you have your procedure in the local hospital and you've got those doctors up and running and you've got a great patient talking about how life-changing that medical device is, then you get your earned coverage. So it's about knowing what activity to do and whether to pay for it, and it as part of a whole integrated program.
Yeah, totally. And actually the editorial is the trust side of things, and the advertorial is the awareness side of things, I suppose, if we think about it that way. Yeah. So because we know from a marketing perspective, people need to see something 15 to 25 times before they actually resonate and do something about it. Yeah. So just having editorial won't probably be consistent enough. You will drive action depending on where somebody is through their journey. But actually then having the advertorial as well means you're seen everywhere all the time. So as soon as somebody has that problem that you're solving, not only do you have the trust from the editorial, but you have the awareness from the advertorial, which then is more likely to move them through the journey. So it is about all the channels together.
Yeah, and also, I mean, this is obviously fairly complex because obviously the media is complex now. So once you have your coverage, quite often it will be in digital form, and think of all the ways you can repurpose that. For social media, at conferences, you can make a film to show of all your coverage, to show to your physicians at their user group meeting. I mean, this is endlessly repurposable, and it is so credible, immediately gets attention. So it's hugely valuable. It's not just that immediate coverage hit. It's also about driving up your search engine optimization with good and relevant links, and all the events and, in-person events you're going to do, all the medical conferences, how you're going to get renewed attention from patient groups because suddenly they'll want to talk to you, because they know they want coverage as well. They want to be in the Sunday Times as well. So suddenly the doors are opening to NICE, to all the patient groups. Believe me, it's a totally different ball game once you've had that coverage. It's like suddenly all the doors open.
Extremely valuable from when we're talking about it here, and I think definitely as part of the campaign. When we talk about marketing agencies, and I just come back to everybody that we're speaking to now, so there's all different types of marketing agents, they're all different specialities. If somebody says, right, I think we need to start considering PR, and I think in our next episode we're going to talk about actually how you get 67 pieces of coverage in one product. But what should they think about when they're looking for a PR agency? Because not all PR, I assume not all PR agencies are the same.
No, and I would say, obviously know what your goals are and what sort of company are you, what sort of person are you. You're going to have to talk to your agency quite a lot if it's going to work. So please do get on. Feel like that you can brainstorm a bit and be creative, because actually creativity is key. It's a key skill of PR.
What do you mean? Tell me more about that. What do you mean by that?
Well, we're going to talk about that in another podcast a little bit, but it's all about, as I said, sometimes you've had that easy win from somebody at the golf club. So you've had that piece of coverage, but how do you then reinvent that story? And as time goes on and you have more engagement with different individuals, how do you then repackage the story for a different type of audience? It's all about that. So test your PR agency. Do you feel that you're having a really good to and fro with them, where you're having a really good discussion and you feel inspired and creative yourself? Do you feel like you can get on with them? And also, are they flexible? Because I know from running a small business, and Claudia, that you need flexibility. It's all about cash flow. So is your agency, are they going to nail you down to a retainer that, on contract, and they're going to absolutely nail down to the floor? Can you afford that, really? I mean, if I was looking for a PR agency to PR me, I would want flexibility.
I think that's a really interesting point, because actually it's about value add, isn't it? Yeah. And it's about the reason I want to engage a PR agency, for example, is because I want to do things as needed that's right for my company. So it might be that the piece of PR is right now, but actually my next piece of PR doesn't come for a year's time because that's in my product life cycle, or 6 months time, or something like that. So it is actually having that flexibility so that you can keep running your business in the right way outside of the PR that you're doing. So I agree, it is not necessarily you have to do this. It's actually, providing that flexibility for them as well.
It is. And, it might be that obviously in a perfect world, your PR agent could be just a member of your team. Yeah. They could be the only presence you have in the UK. So think about who you're hiring. Could that person advise you on, say, patient group advocacy? Say you have that meeting with NICE that you don't want to mess up. is your PR agent able to talk to the patient groups? Are they reaching out to them, sending the coverage that they've gained for you?
So it's really the specialisation you're talking about there. So does your PR agency have that real specialisation, not only in healthcare, but in medical device, and maybe even in the sector of medical device that you're looking at?
Yeah, I mean, I personally think that that's what I'd be looking for if I was running a PR agency. I mean, my best friend runs a really successful company, but it's not a medical device company. And she's constantly asking me advice. And I say, I can give you outline advice, but this is not my specialty. I don't really know. I could find you a PR agency. I could almost interview them for you. But I really, as much as I love to help you, I can't, because I'm a medical device PR.
I have that exact same conversation with my friends who say, can you help with our marketing? And I'm like, but it's not my speciality. So it's exactly the same, because we're only medical device. Yes. So we had a really cool conversation before about when you're saying, you have to feel creative when you're talking to your PR agency. Yeah. And actually probably that they're thinking about things in a different way than you are, because otherwise you almost think, why can't I do it? But we had a really good conversation about one of your previous clients. I don't know if you're happy to mention them, but it's a pretty well-known one. And actually how you positioned this problem or this story to journalists. And I thought it was really clever. Are you happy to talk about that?
Yeah, I'm sure they won't mind. So the client is the product is Eurolift, obviously now owned by Teleflex. At the time that I was working for them, which is 2013, I met. It was run by a guy called Justin Hall, who's now moved on. Justin, if you're listening, you are amazing. I loved working with you. Justin is an absolute rock star. But I remember meeting him at Heathrow Airport in the sort of lounge there in the one of the hotels, and thinking he was talking to me about the product. Now, this product is to treat benign prostatic hyperplasia, which is a benign, non-cancerous growth of the prostate, which is the most common male health condition in the over 50s. And I thought, oh, bingo, that sounds good. And then he started talking about what Eurolift actually does. So it's essentially a way of holding back the tissue so that men can wee. He was talking to me, and I was drinking a cup of coffee, and I was just thinking, I don't want to talk about men's wee, really. I can't imagine ringing up the Sunday Times and talking about wee very much. This isn't going to work. But, Justin is an amazing guy. Immediately got on with him. I felt that feeling that I could be creative with him. But by the time I'd left that meeting, I thought, yeah, I can do this. I absolutely can do this. And thank God I did, because that has been utterly transformative for my life, my agency, and has taught me so much. So that was 7 years of work.
And how did you position it, though? Because then you told me how you positioned it with a journalist.
Yeah. So at the time, so we're talking 2013, 2014, a long time ago, you would ring up a journalist and say, hey, can I talk to you about prostates? And that would get their attention. They'd laugh. And then you'd say, they'd say, prostate cancer, right? And you'd say, no, not prostate cancer, but this is the most common male health condition in the over 50s. All right, what's that? I'm crossing my legs, Amanda. What is it? The conversation would start there. So it was about this very, very common condition, but they hadn't heard of it. So you have a twist. We call that, in journalism, we call that the twist. So that is a good way to start a conversation with a journalist. Surprise them. Be a bit cheeky.
Yeah.
It always helps if you know them a bit, but I don't know every journalist. Obviously, there are new people coming into the industry. I don't know everybody. I think I can actually pitch a journalist when I don't know them.
But it's to position it in a way that they care about. Is it in public interest? So is it a big enough problem? I think you were explaining that to me before. There are sort of certain criteria you need to go for.
Public interest is number one. Yeah. So you've nailed that straight away, haven't you? With it's the most common male health condition in the over 50s. And, the TURP, which is the procedure to cut away the prostate tissue so that, you can wee normally and you don't get blocked. That actually causes quite a lot of side effects, like sexual side effects. If you're talking to a male journalist, that always helps because they immediately get it. Yeah. I mean, I've had female journalists saying, I don't care. You know, to be honest, it wasn't always successful. So always try and get a man on the phone. They definitely care.
As a leaving thought, what is the one thing, the one most important thing about PR that medical device marketers should be thinking about?
I think they need to think, why am I not doing this? Because it's going to solve your problems, a lot of your problems in loads of different areas like SEO, as I mentioned, patient group advocacy, gaining trust and attention from physicians, investors, patients, potential patients in future. Why aren't you doing it? What are the barriers? Remove the barriers. So what is it that's wrong? If you're not working for a company that has an utterly life-changing story, why not? There are plenty of new technologies out there. You know, what I'm looking for is a device, and it can be a Eurolift, you know, it can be an implanted stent, if you like, to hold back, a staple to hold back prostate tissue. So unsexy on the face of it, but it's life-changing because it preserves sexual function. It doesn't remove tissue. So it's so much better than the standard of care. And the men who had it were so grateful that they would talk about anything.
And I think we see that in many other areas of medical device. The patients are so grateful that they are good advocates.
Yeah, it's all about that tapping into that altruism, that gratitude, and having them speak from the heart.
So here's a question which is a bit controversial. We haven't spoken about it before this podcast, but I'm going to ask it anyway because I ask it on all the podcasts. So as an average value, what should somebody expect to pay for a PR campaign? And I mean, I know it's going to be, it depends. Of course it depends. It depends on how long it is, all these different things. But what could somebody expect, like as a range of what a PR campaign would cost? So if they're thinking about it now and they're like, I think I need to get in contact with Amanda and just understand how the land lays, what can they expect on the other end?
I think I said before that what I value most of all in my life as running a business is flexibility. If your budget is tight, look at getting a project fee. And you really should be looking at around between, as a minimum, about £10,000.
And what's included in, like, so just so I would understand from somebody who doesn't understand, what would be included in something like £10,000? So what could I then go to my senior management and say, if we spent around about £10,000, it might be 12, it might be 15, it might be 8. I would probably get something like this. Like, what would that look like?
Okay, well, first of all, if you're going to a credible agency, they will rule you out if you don't have the essential elements in place. So I said, very enthusiastic, one enthusiastic doctor, the safety certification that is key, and the ability, if you don't have it already, of getting a patient advocate. If you can tick those two boxes, the safety and the one doctor who's using your product and is genuinely excited by it, then we can get coverage for you.
And what does coverage mean in the sense? So I'll explain how my mind's working. So would it be something like, so if we got a piece of coverage, it would be an interview with the doctor and the patient potentially, that would then be on TV or a news channel? Or is that an example of something that could fit into the budget of £10,000 or around about that? Or is it just in a print journal? That's the sort of question I'm just interested in.
It depends what the client wants me to do. Yeah. But I mean, let's say you want it to be on TV, as long as, you know, it hasn't appeared on that channel before and it's new to that particular channel. I think, you know, you can get TV coverage and perhaps regional coverage as well around where that site is, where that hospital is actually based, for around about £10,000, which I think is fantastic value. You may not want regional, you may want national.
I think everybody wants national to start off with. I think I have an example of when I, before I knew anything about PR.
Can I tell you, can I tell you something about Eurolift?
Yes, of course.
We never really got much national coverage.
Oh, it was all regional?
It was all regional, yeah. So what we did, we started off with national and we got some national hits. We never had a national TV hit, ever once.
Interesting.
No. And we did it regionally. So we did it region by region by region by region. It was a slow burn campaign, but what happened was, by getting all that regional, mainly TV coverage, and obviously all the local newspapers, etc., what we did was we absolutely nailed the older male audience who tends to watch the regional news and listens to the radio stations around that hospital. So we got the push-pull effect of, yes, the doctors in the hospital totally got the messaging about how much better it was for the patients, how it saved money for the NHS because, you know, they weren't having a TURP, so they weren't in hospital for 2 or 3 nights. And we absolutely got that messaging correct. So we knew exactly how much money the NHS was saving, as well as how much better it was for the men. So got that messaging right. And the message got across to the patients and the doctors in a way that, you know, I believe now that product from, you know, literally from nothing, from one private hospital when I started working for them, they had a substantial, I mean, large market share of a very big market. So TURP used to be one of the most commonly performed NHS procedures. So imagine you went from one private hospital to routine commissioning across many, many, many trusts in 7 years. And that's why it's a famous campaign.
And nice recommendation.
It's a fantastic recommendation, yeah. But yeah, it's not always about national. Sometimes you want national, sometimes you want to do it region by region by region.
I think that's really interesting because I wouldn't have thought that. I would have thought national was always better. So what I was going to say before is I think when I first even entered the world of talking to PR, the first thing I said is, we want to be on Tomorrow's World, which I bet everybody hears all the time. And I was like, why can't we get on there? And so I mean, I think that sort of maybe was just my perception, but I think that is the perception that you want to go as big as possible. But actually, it's interesting that that's not always the best thing because it's about where your audience is and who you want to target. Because ultimately, of course, it's all about then those patients going into the NHS and asking for the technology, isn't it? So it comes back to our original comment about there's no point in talking at a high level if none of your audience are there listening.
How many times have we watched the 6 o'clock news and heard about a trial? That sounds amazing. Like, I can't believe that our NHS is able to do this, or that we as humans are able to achieve this. This is incredible. That's amazing. You do nothing. If you watch it on Midlands Today, in my case, because I live in the Midlands, and it's in my local hospital, and I have that condition, there's a call to action.
You're so right. And then people are actually, because it's close by.
Yeah,
totally. Fantastic. So thank you for your time today on today's episode. Next time, I can't wait until we speak, when we're going to speak about your work with another company, which got 1.2 billion views. I know I keep saying that because I can't believe it. Over 67 pieces of...
Say it again. Billion.
1.2 billion. I know, I thought million. No, billion. So next episode, we're going to talk about exactly how you do that type of campaign. So what that looks like so that our listeners can actually think maybe that could apply to our technology as well. So they can just see how that's broken down because, you know, that seems an epic achievement. So thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
And we will speak on the next episode. Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Medical Device Marketing Podcast. I hope you've learned a little bit more about PR and how it can help you to engage with your audience. Make sure you join us for the next episode where I'll speak to Amanda about her 1.2 billion views for a recent client over 67 pieces of coverage. Have a fantastic day.